Okay, we can see everybody. Has everyone got cups of tea or coffee or some or nice things to enjoy? Emily has soup. That's delicious. All right. So May story time. We've got some fun topics, and I ended up doing something I haven't really done before, which was I grouped the topics we got into 3 kind of categories, and then wrote about those general themes by way of including all these things. And so I found that they all kind of belonged somewhere. So this is what we had. First one was the kind of variation in interpretation of our topics for our writing challenge. So the fact that the same words could be interpreted quite differently by different people. We also had a choir as a request, and like cat meows or other animal sounds and human use thereof. So one of the kind of general headings I had was sort of communication and language and lyrics and those kind of things. Then we had backyard camping and flying marshmallow missiles, things you want to burn or see burn. So generally sort of camping and bonfires. So next one. And then the final one was animals. So we had animals don't social distance. When you find a lost pet, but it's not the one you've seen on the poster for a lost pet. Gate crashing animals. So animals that are kind of in the wrong herd or turn up, the kangaroo amongst the sheep or whatever. And of course, the cat communication and the meowing kind of falls into the animal category as well. And I've missed one out actually from the sort of communication and language one, which is WTF keys, which was a term that Dad coined for the function keys on computers. Since they do different things for different people's computers. So I thought I'd start us with a little poem, and this poem is called Codes. Can you say what you really mean, or might you be mistaken? The same words have meanings many more than the one thought of by those who made them. A different life brings different truths to the hearing of your words. So what you thought you said might never be what's really heard. How can we be sure then that in meaning we aren't always alone? Perhaps we read much more of meaning, not in the words, but in their tone. And if this is true, then you must see how it's possible sometimes to replace your words with a simple meow. And you'll be heard by like-minded souls who speak likewise with heart. A cat meow or strange coded sound, you'll be understood and set apart.
Yeah,
that's right.
And so our story is called What We Don't Say in Meows. Is anyone else hearing a meow?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who was that?
Is that Lucky again?
No, it'll be.
It's actually here. I think it might not be a cat but a child.
Oh,
But it,
No, it
it
was
really
It
sounded
sure
like
sounded
there were
like a
some
cat.
sound effects there.
maybe it was a
Now
child
sincerely.
pretending to be a cat.
Silly.
It could be. Okay, so what we don't say in Meows. I'd like to burn that newfangled hotel what's it they're building in our main street, declared Betty, as she took a corner cautiously. In the back of the car, her granddaughter, Anae, was flicking through the pages of the choir sheet music in Betty's binder and giggled. It was a child.
No power tools this time, just the children cat.
Children. I'm not sure that's the sort of thing Baxter meant, Betty, her friend and neighbour Barb replied from the passenger seat. I'm sure he meant literally, like what would make nice smells on the bonfire tonight. I was going to say pine cones. They make good smells and lovely popping sounds. Can we burn my homework questions? Anae asked. If I don't have the worksheet, I clearly can't do the maths. You can write me a note and say it was an accident. Barb twisted round in her seat. Ouch, she rubbed her back. That doesn't sound like a much better excuse than the dog ate my homework to me, Missy. Betty squinted at an approaching road sign. I wouldn't be so sure, Barb. Granny put it in the fire by accident might be a bit more believable than the dog story. And they giggled again. Don't encourage her, Betty, Barb exclaimed. Baxter was the director of Sea Cats, the community choir for Adult Tiersview Singers. By adult, Betty suspected that he meant mature in a somewhat rude sense, but it was a good place to connect with the locals. And since she and Matt had only moved in a few months earlier, this was important. Barb lived next door to them, and she was in the choir, which meant that naturally she felt strongly that others would benefit from joining. She said that the adult in the title was just to discourage teenage riffraff. The day they moved in, Betty and Matt had been about 5 minutes into unpacking their kitchen utensils when Barb had knocked on the door, her arms full of a welcome basket, which contained mostly scones and jam, but also a flyer for the community choir. They'd been friends ever since, despite Betty's quickly proving to be a diva-ish soloist soprano type when actually at choir practice. It was autumn now, and the occasional frost and the emergence of the soft, damp heads of fungi heralded the end of fire band season. This meant one very delightful thing to the Sea Cats. It was time for their annual choir retreat at Baxter and Lena's farm in the hills. The choir had apparently established a tradition of writing a song of their own around the bonfire at the end of a full day of rehearsals. Betty was a little nervous about this prospect. Would she be expected to come up with words to contribute? But Barb, who liked to say sage wise woman things now that she was 75, had just said, whatever comes to mind will be what you really want to say. Betty was all the more sceptical for hearing this. That was all well and good, but what if what one really wanted to say was unsuitable for public utterance? Baxter had given them the instruction to think about things you'd like to burn in advance of the retreat. He hadn't said whether this had anything to do with the songwriting, or was merely an icebreaker, or perhaps, as Barb was determined to believe, a simple practical suggestion for the creation of an atmospheric fire, piled with the choir members' favourite scents. Knowing Baxter, Betty reflected, it could be all three. I'm pretty sure Baxter did mean for us to think about it metaphorically, she told Barb. Well, in that case, Barb replied, puffing herself up with a little shake, I'd like to burn that top my sister gave me at Christmas. It's the most cliched old lady garment I've ever seen. I might be ready to say sage things, but I'm not ready for twin sets. Betty pulled her coral lipsticked lips into a hard set line. I wear twin sets, she said, and I like them. I should rather like to burn your fashion sense. They arrived at the farm at 9 a.m. sharp, to find that the other choir members had taken the arrival time as a suggestion. One other car was pulled up near the farmhouse, and Baxter could be seen across the field, hauling hay bales and benches towards the pre-stacked bonfire pile to form a rough circle of seats. As they got out of the car, Betty thought she heard the sound of a cat meowing. Meow, she replied, looking around for the creature, which she immediately desired to pat. Meow, she heard again. Meow, she replied, wandering around the back of the vehicle in her search. Betty, for heaven's sake, stop making animal sounds. Barb got her choir folder out of the boot, looking embarrassed. I'm trying to see the cat, Betty returned, thinking Barb very unreasonable. A boy, about the same age as Anae, appeared just then from behind the large veranda that protruded from the back of the farmhouse. Meow, he said. Betty looked at him in surprise. Meow, she responded. Barb looked dismayed. The boy laughed. That was silly. Barb nodded. Yes, it was. But the boy grinned. Not because it was Meows, but because I said hello and she said, obviously. That doesn't make any sense. Oops, Betty laughed. I must have sounded a bit different because I was surprised. I thought you were a cat. The boy laughed again. I thought you were a cat. I'm Arjun. My dad does the choir. I'm looking for Kumman. He's the cat. Arjun began wandering back around the veranda, peering behind the various objects that littered the little lawned area. There was a wheelbarrow standing on its front, a bike, a small pine tree in a pot, and a sack labelled chicken poo. Do you often talk in cat meows? Asked Anae disdainfully, only just getting out of the car with her pencils in hand. Yes, said Arjun, looking underneath the veranda now. They can make a lot more sense than English, you know. For example, you said often, but that could mean different amounts depending what you think is a lot. If you just said meow, you could have told me you thought I was a bit weird and you don't understand without asking any ambiguous questions. Anae gave him a look that was definitely the equivalent of meow and turned to Betty. When are you going to start singing, Granny? Baxter, having spotted them by this time, came over. Hello, ladies. Would you like some tea? You're not meowing at the guests, are you, Arjun? Arjun paused in his cat search. I was, but I didn't mean to. I'm trying to find Kumman, and she was meowing. He pointed at Betty. So I thought it was Kumman, and I meowed too. Meow! A large, fluffy ginger cat appeared, looking down at them from on top of the veranda roof. There you are! Arjun patted the veranda railing. Get down! Mum says you're disgraceful. You won't get any treats today. Meow, said Kumman. They all went inside, including Kumman, who, contrary to Arjun's prior assertion, was poured some milk from the little jug set out for the tea. Arjun, make sure you take Kumman outside or into your room when we start singing, Baxter said, leaning down to pat the cat. You remember what happened last time, and we don't want that again, do we? Betty noticed that Barb was eyeing Kumman a little warily. She looked from Barb to Baxter to the beautiful, fluffy, purring cat and back again. What do you mean? She asked, mystified. What happened last time? Meow, Arjun replied significantly. Meow, said Betty, as though she'd understood. Internally, she felt a bit concerned. What had she missed last year? More of the choir gradually assembled, and Lena came in from the other room with a spotty blue heeler dog in tow. Hello, she smiled. This is Solo. He likes to join in. Well, sort of take over, actually, so he might have to go out while we practice. Betty patted Solo behind the ears. Baxter clapped his hands. Right, everybody, let's all finish getting our drinks and make a circle. They all shuffled about in the big, sparsely furnished sunroom. Betty looked about appreciatively at the simple wooden furniture and patchwork rugs that scattered the space. This was her kind of spot, she thought. Out of one of the big old-fashioned windows, she could see a wide green field dotted with sheep and tall white-trunked eucalypts. Presently, she frowned and peered closer. Baxter, is that a big red kangaroo amongst your sheep? Baxter smiled and looked out. Oh, Bounder's out there today. Yeah, he turns up sometimes. They all seem to get along, so we don't mind. We'd bring him in for shearing, but he hasn't got much hair as it is. Betty chuckled and watched Bounder and the sheep grazing together for a moment. Then Baxter produced a blackboard. On it he'd written, "Burn away your cares and light the fire of inspiration." So, he said, have you all had a think on the way here about what you want to burn? Let's share a few to get our brains warmed up. The choir members exchanged glances. Who would go first? Were their thoughts suitable to share? Arjun had scooped up Kumman and invited Anae to go and meet some of the other farm animals, and they disappeared off down the long hallway. Partway down, Arjun turned around and called back seriously, I would like to burn marshmallows because they're actually quite good burnt. And also, I would like to burn the most efficient fuel for cooking marshmallows because that's sensible. He turned back down the hallway. Anae looked a bit incredulous and then turned back herself. I would like to burn embarrassment because it's a useless emotion that only ever stops you from doing cool stuff. And also, whatever that note was that Mr. Champers gave to Mum on Friday, because I'm pretty sure it was something bad about me and caused me to have weekend homework. She turned and flounced off after Arjun. Well, said Baxter. Thank you, kids, for getting us started. Anyone else got one? Lena put down her mug of peppermint tea on a nearby windowsill. I'd like to burn adverts that come on in the middle of relaxation playlists, she declared. The choir laughed, a collective rumble that warmed the room. As icebreakers went, it was pretty good, Betty thought. All sheet music for Christmas carols, shouted someone near the door. Another chuckle. My fear of auditions, said someone else. Phantom of the Opera, which gave me my fear of auditions, added Baxter himself. Our mobile phone, said Betty, waving the offending object. She shared a mobile with Matt, and every time she thought she had it all worked out, the darn thing would download an update and change itself. Change in general, Barb interjected. Betty looked at her in surprise. That wasn't very sage. Can't be doing with it, Barb added. Everyone laughed. When they fell silent, Baxter turned and played a note on the piano and launched straight into their warm-up. Things to burn were temporarily forgotten as everyone me-me-me'd and made sirens, and Solo the dog started to howl at the top of his lungs from outside the window. The window was closed, such that Solo's howls were merely muffled harmonies and the occasional bung note, much like some of the choir members' own. And rehearsal continued until, in the middle of a very smooth and poignant rendition of Blackbird, there was an aggravating rap on the front door. Baxter closed his fingertips, bringing the voices of the choir to a stop partway through a verse, and Lena went to see who it was. The rest of the choir peered curiously after her. A teenager stood on the doormat, hair spiked up, and a fluffy bantam chicken held tightly between folded arms. The youth proffered the chicken towards Lena. We saw a lost chicken poster for here, and this one was wandering up and down our grain shed. Lena peered into the bantam's beady eyes. "We don't keep bantams," she replied, looking confused. "The chicken we've lost is a regular red hen. I suppose this one can come and stay in our coop until the owner's found, though. We've got a bit of room with Rocket missing." She took the clucking creature carefully out of the teen's grip and tucked it under her arm. The choir watched out of the side window and helped themselves to lunch and drinks, while Lena took the new chook around to the chook pen, where 2 other regular sort of chickens, one speckled black and white and one red, were pecking and scratching around in the mild autumn sunshine. "Cinnamon, Chives, you're going to have a visitor," Lena told them, lowering the bantam over the fence. The 2 other chickens squawked and ran about a bit at the unexpected entry of a 3rd bird, but the excitement soon died down and was replaced with interest in the grain Lena tossed out. As Lena turned away, however, there was a hissing sound, and a 4th large black bird stalked into view. A swan. "Oh no, Baxter, Pumped is here again," complained Lena. She shook her finger at the swan, a gesture which went completely unnoticed. "You behave. Be nice." Lena watched warily as the swan approached the seed. The chickens moved aside to make room, and no immediate altercations resulted. So Lena gave the swan a last stern glance and came back into the house. "Right, well, sorry about that, everyone." She picked up her music. Where were we? It occurred to Betty, during their 3rd run-through of Tainted Love, to wonder how Anae was getting along with Arjun, and whether or not her maths was getting done. The maths was not getting done, of course, but oddly, an attempt at homework had been made. It was just that a distraction had occurred in the form of computer function keys. Arjun had been greatly enjoying being an expert in computing and demonstrating various function key shortcuts, when Anae had declared with certainty that some of these keys did not do the same things on the laptops she used at home and school. "They're different on my sister's computer too," she insisted. "She said to me, they're not really function keys, more like WTF keys. I'm not sure what that stands for, but I get the idea, which is that on a new computer, you'll have no idea what they do." "Ah, I know what that stands for," Arjun said, and promptly educated her on the subject. While Anae was gleefully digesting this information, Arjun looked thoughtful. "Actually, that makes function keys a bit like some words." Anae, who was busy thinking about the right context in which to use her new piece of vocabulary, looked confused. "What?" Arjun shrugged. "Well, when you say the same words to different people, they react in totally different ways, even though what you said is the same. Just like different computers do different things when you press the same function keys. And it would be so much easier if they all matched, but they don't." Anae thought a bit. "Easier, but less like people," she stated. "You just have to find out stuff about them. Then you know what they think about stuff." Arjun frowned. "Like different programming makes the keys do different stuff." This led to a debate about whether the functions of WTF keys on a given computer could be reprogrammed, and eventually to the desktop computer becoming frozen. Anae suspected that none of the adults' responses to the words, "we broke the computer," would be very nice, so she recommended turning the computer off and going to find out what was for dinner. "I wonder if there are any hot chips," Arjun mused. "Mum said we could have some, but it's been really busy getting ready for choir retreat, so she might have forgotten to buy potatoes." "I think homemade ones always suck anyway," Anae proclaimed. They're never crispy. WTF, replied Arjun, by way of demonstrating the correct use of the term. Soggy chips are great. I like it when they're completely soaked in vinegar. Ew, exclaimed Anae. Then she added, WTF, just to show she got it. The adults were taking a break and working together to lay out a shared dinner when Arjun and Anae reappeared. Arjun's inquiries about chips confirmed to his dismay that potatoes had indeed been left off the shopping list. I tried making some with sweet potato last week and they were very nice, Barb ventured. We don't have any sweet potato either, I'm afraid, said Lena sadly. We could try carrots or parsnips, suggested Betty. Anae screwed up her nose in disgust. This did not sound like hot chips to her. Nonetheless, some parsnips were thrown in a pot, in long, thin strips, then into the oven in oil. Once inspired, Betty was hard to distract from her cause. While the parsnip chips were cooking, and most of the sea cats were eating, Baxter, Barb, Anae, and Arjun went out to set light to the bonfire. Out by the prepared stack of kindling and logs, the shadows had grown long across the grass, and galahs were coming in to land in waves below the big gum trees that bordered the paddock. They were noisy, as though reporting to one another on the day all at once. Arjun tilted his head, listening closely to their sound as the flock began to peck amongst the stubbly grass. One of those isn't a galah, he said, turning to look. Baxter turned too. Sure enough, there was one much bigger bird in the group, pecking about just as though it belonged, but not making quite the right sound. Rocket! Baxter moved towards the clamouring birds. WTF, said Anae. That's a chicken. Anae, exclaimed Barb, who was evidently aware of the acronym. See, Arjun spread his hands. Totally different reaction. Rocket was not keen on the idea of returning to the coop and took off along with her new friends when Baxter attempted to retrieve her, landing high up in a nearby tree. At least we know where she is now, Lena mused, watching Rocket try to keep her balance in the breeze. The choir gathered around the fire, and some marshmallows were produced, much to Arjun's glee. You know what would just complete it all, mused Betty. A damper in the coals. Lena sighed. It would be nice, yeah. Sadly, I think we're all out of flour. Barb considered. Do you have any oats? We might have, answered Baxter uncertainly. Do you have a food processor? Owing to the need to go and make oat flour, followed by damper dough, it was quite late before the whole choir was assembled around the bonfire, and all of the sparklers had gone out before even a chorus for the year's song was agreed upon. So, I'd like to return to our theme of things to burn, Baxter pronounced. Let's contrast the things we want to burn to forget them, like the ones we mentioned earlier, with things we'd like to light up. What do you want to light up? He looked at Betty first, much to her horror, but somehow she found herself taking Barb's advice and saying the first thing that came to mind. Things we want to remember, to shine the spotlight on, the highlights of life. Lovely, said Baxter, scribbling on a notepad. Friendships and connections that are there even when we don't know it, said Lena. Great, what else? The similarities between us, Arjun threw in. Ideas and sort of like the creative spark, Anae added. Soon the list was long, and the sea cats had some words that seemed to resonate with everyone. whether they meant exactly the same thing to each person or otherwise. Burn away the fears, the grudges and the wrongs. Let the fire hold only the soul of our song. Light up the spark we hold in common, the spark we hold in common. Baxter picked out some tentative chords on an acoustic guitar, beginning with delicate finger picking that built up to strong power chords. The more confident members of the choir began to hum and toy with a melody, then a harmony. The sparklers all gone, Arjun suddenly had an idea. He ran out into the darkness under Rocket's tree and began collecting sticks. Then he retrieved the marshmallow packet, and Anae helped to poke a marshmallow onto every stick and hand them out to the choir. The two children demonstrated what to do by plunging their sticks into the flames, pulling the burning marshmallow torches out and holding them aloft. Gradually, the adults let go of their misgivings about burnt marshmallow and raised their sugary torches to sway in time as the chorus grew in voices and confidence. Their song rippled out into the soft black of the night, and even the galahs were quiet, as if to listen to what they had to say. But suddenly, out of the dark, came a sound far less sweet. Oh no, exclaimed Baxter midline. Out of the night flew a toothed feline ball of fury with razor-sharp toes and landed with a screech on Betty's face. Betty let out a shriek. WTF, yelled Anae. Anae, shouted Barb. You're in my personal space, screeched Betty, hurling the ball of furry fury away from her and accidentally hurling her flaming marshmallow as well. Fellow choir members leapt aside and marshmallows flew in all directions, feet hurriedly stamping small balls of flaming sugar into the damp autumn grass. Disgraceful cat, snapped Lena. Common doesn't like singing, said Arjun quietly. In a flurry of stomps and small squeaks and exclamations, the choir fell silent. Kumman sat glaring, tail a-twitch, under Rocket's tree. Inside, said Baxter darkly, scooping up Kumman and marching him towards the house. How did he get outside? Lena sighed, her tone despairing. They heard the sound of the screen door closing behind the cat and Baxter's reapproaching feet. Betty patted her nose to determine whether it was intact. Then she looked around at the shaken singers. It wasn't right that the moment should be lost. It should be highlighted, one of those things they would all choose to light up in memory. She took a deep breath and soloed the first line. Slowly, the group rejoined the chorus, including Solo, who howled from the veranda. But with so many voices in unison, his doggy tones blended in. It was midnight when Betty, Barb and Anae climbed back into the car, and Betty had to brave use of her mobile phone to let Anae's parents know they were safely on their way. Arjun waved them off from the driveway, with Baxter and Lena, cuddling a calmed and purring Kumman. Meow, he called out as the car reversed. Anae wound down the window. Meow, she chorused along with Betty. And as they waved too, they knew they all meant exactly the same thing.
Oh,
Perhaps meows were better than words sometimes, after all.
That was so great.
that was a beauty.
That was very good, yes. I really like Arjun's metaphor about the keys and how and then words. I think that was very good.
Yeah.
It's a very good parallel.
Yeah.
Very true.
Wonderful.
So I wonder, our listeners would like to say some things they'd like to burn.
Barry's already
A
said
chicken!
What?
what?
Jane and Andrew have some chickens from next door that get into their yard and are like digging everything up. They seem to be able to fly, and they keep coming back every time they return them.
Tell us about your chickens today, Andrew.
About 3 lots. The biggest congregation was 4. And they terrorised the whole backyard, basically.
Barry said that 3 times that he'd like to burn Donald Trump.
Oh yes, well, that's an obvious one.
Yeah, it was on my list. Actually, what I did when I was writing this story was I listed all the characters and then sort of had like general members of the choir, and I put down what I thought each of them would want to burn. And some of those answers came up in the story, but others not so much. Yeah, I did put Donald Trump there, but yeah,
Probably his hair.
bit obvious. The hair thing.
It could make great.
Magnificent sparklers.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a tricky one though, because it is like, it is quite an abstract question, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It could be interpreted many ways.
The sweet things and so on. And actually, I really like that. And I did like the what would you like to burn as in get rid of?
Yeah.
And what would you like to burn as in shine a spotlight on? That was nice. Yeah, so what's beautiful on the fire? Rosemary.
Yeah.
Rosemary.
Citrus peel.
Barbecue chicken.
Just feels beautiful. Yeah.
I'm setting a theme.
Cloves. Cloves are good.
Yeah, cloves are very nice.
Ooh,
I toss them on the top of our combustion stove sometimes. That's fantastic.
sounds great. I like that
If you
idea.
want a nice flame, baking paper that's been in the oven's pretty good.
Yeah, it does a very nice sort of pop and
Oh,
flame
right.
very quickly.
Because it's really, really dry. Is that why?
Yeah.
It's oil.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Of course.
Oil built into it, yeah.
Of course.
I think another one of those logs, you know, those Yule logs we did that time.
Oh, those are
Yeah.
very
The
nice.
holes filled in and you
Yeah,
and
that's
you
really
write
good.
messages
All
and
little messages.
we should do one of those one time when, you know, we're all together in a cold time. We're allowed to have a fire,
Yes,
like last year in August, yeah.
good idea. So,
Skin off an orange, citrus.
Yeah, I love that. And it takes a really long time to dry out, so you get lots of lovely kind of citrus oil smells for a while before it sort of becomes really dry, and then you can put it in the fire, and then it goes woof, just like baking paper. It's very good.
Fire starter.
Fire starters, yeah. If you dry them out, they make really good fire starters for next time as well. But also things that smell really fabulous on the fire, like, you know, when you put onions and stuff on the fire.
Oh yeah.
Pumpkin.
Pumpkin.
So
You're making me hungry now.
how many of you have improvised ingredients recently?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes,
what
a
have
lot.
you used instead of?
A lot.
Emily's been a bit of a foraging and substitution genius.
I've been doing lots of experiments.
Tell us, Ed.
I've been trying to do yogurt making with a variety of non-dairy milks. So I've learned how to make almond milk and then how to turn that into yogurt. That's been good, and I'm continuing to iterate on that.
Almond yogurt. Yummy.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Details at some point, please.
Yeah, sure. It's very easy. Well, the yogurt part's a little complicated, but the almond milk part is not
And
complicated.
then you end up with almond meal as well.
Yes, and then you have
Yeah,
almond
and
meal
then
that you can use for all
yeah.
sorts of things. And I made this wasn't a substitution, but I learned how to make marzipan with the almond meal that I had left over from the almond milk. And I've made a sourdough starter, but not one with gluten-free flour in it. And now I'm wondering whether I can make a sourdough starter that has oat flour. So that's very cool. Theoretically, I could.
So have you still got your starter? Did you?
Yeah, it's going well.
So you used a bit and then you.
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
Yeah. No,
First time you didn't have to throw that first batch out or anything.
nope, it's still going.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, any requests?
Here's an interesting one. This could be a challenge. So the thing that I'm working on for homework at the moment is called a dichotomous key. And essentially it's a list of questions which just have two choices, as in dichotomous, as in two choices. And you go through the questions and they will lead you to, in this case, a particular animal. So it's like a way of identifying animals. So you go through and you have a lot of like yes no questions. Yeah, it's like playing 20 questions.
Cord and
yeah,
go to
exactly.
The cord
Okay, does it have? Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to ask about dichotomous key, but it doesn't necessarily have to be for animals or
something else.
Anything. Just something to do with like a lot of binary choices.
Oh, that's nice.
And they lead you to something, yeah.
And they lead you to something, exactly.
What about when they don't, though, as well? You know,
yes, exactly.
Ask the question, do you want A or B? And the person replies, yes.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Oh, no.
Thanks, Andrew thing. Do you want tea or coffee? Yes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Caffeine.
Yes, you don't care what form it comes in.
I like the cats. I think the cats could make a reappearance.
Oh, the swan as well.
Oh, the swan was and the chalk. The chalk.
Yes.
I like the chalk with the glass.
Yeah.
I don't know what I was expecting. I should have expected that it would be the missing chalk, but I didn't kind of anticipate.
Always reminds me of the song on Sesame Street, the one about chickens in the trees.
Yes! I didn't think of that. There are chickens in the trees. There are chickens in the trees.
No, you'll have
to
listen. It's the rendition. What is that?
I will find it. I'll find it on YouTube.
Find it.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
It is.
So we want some of the animals to reappear, do we?
Yeah.
Wouldn't hurt. I loved the old ladies coming back, actually.
I did too. I'm very pleased they all came back. Thank you.
Yes, I saw your face light up as well, Beth, and I thought, this is us. In our twin sets. And
I thought it was time to use some of our sort of older and younger characters again.
Yeah, I thought that's a nice
midlife people about my own age. I might be doing a few too many of those, so I thought, well, who can I have? I might go back to Betty and friends, but they're a bit younger in this story. This is actually before Bryn has moved into Tiersview.
I've just arrived.
So
I tell you what else I thought worked really well was the extreme ages, like the kids and the old people.
Yeah.
I thought that was lovely because those communication things are, and the difference in the gestures, the waggly fingers and.
And then it was good too because there were some like non-stereotypical things that happened as well. Like I really liked that first interaction between Arjun and who was it that was meowing back? Was it Barb or Betty? I can't remember.
Betty was meowing back.
Betty was meowing back. Yeah. I thought that was really good and really like endearing. And there were just a few like that where the kids weren't quite how you would stereotypically expect kids to be, or the older people weren't quite how you would expect them, but it fitted really well for the characters. Yeah,
like the perfect Bantam.
Yeah.
And I like that sense that Arjun was like a bit uncool to Anna first, Yeah. And
then by the end, she meows too.
Yeah. That was quite touching. I like that.
Yeah, that scene with them, with the two kids, just reminded me so much of like lots of kind of impromptu play dates, when you're the only two kids at an event for adults, and so you just end up going and looking at the computer or whatever it is, you know.
It's exactly my reference was for it. Maybe we have that experience in common as only children. Sometimes we get like taken along to the work lunch or the like the meetings happening, and you get, you know, sent off to play with the other like teachers' kids or
exactly.
That happens to be there, and they're sometimes like significantly older or younger. Or, they have really different interests. So you go to their house.
And you just end up doing whatever it is that they do.
Like, they're really into computer games, and you're not, or like they live on a farm, and you know.
Okay, I've got one. You've just made me think of a request. Can we have a bus trip?
A bus trip.
A bus trip sounds
because
good.
what made me think of that is you are the two only girls. Sarah is one of these only children who got taken along. I don't think we did it quite as much. We probably did.
Oh, I got taken with Grandma on the Minato trip for like the seniors with all the other elderly ladies, and that's right.
Yeah, and the kind of fascination older people have for young, you know, younger ones, and also delighted with young ones. You're kind of a bit special, but you know they can be both wonderful and very interesting. If you're the sort of kid that watch, you know, people watchers, you can find them fun and whatever. That they can also be a little bit alarming and you know, like the fact that they don't understand some stuff that comes so naturally to you, for example, mobile phones or, you know, or whatever, is just incomprehensible. You know, so that could be quite fun.
You just made me think, when you're talking about the bus trip, though, there's this great comic, and I'm trying to find it, but I don't know that I'll be able to find it. I thought it might be Lunig, but I'm not sure. And it's this a bunch of people get in a bus, and they're sort of going along the road, and they get out of the bus in this kind of empty field, and one of them says to the others, what is this place? Where are we? And the person goes, "It's a field for yelling." And then they sort of go, "Oh, yeah, okay." And then it's just all of them standing in the field going, "Ah!" And then they all just get back in the bus and go home.
Actually, I reckon after the COVID lockdown, quite a lot of people would really go for that.
Yeah, right? I thought it sounded great. I love the idea of yelling.
No, I've always talked about finding a paddock to scream in.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Imagine that as like a tour. You all just get in a bus and you go to a field that you can yell in, and then you go home.
Given the animal bent we were on before, there's something I've been finding quite funny in the news, when it's just been animals reclaiming unlikely spaces.
Oh, wow.
So all over the world there's been like sheep and deer coming into cities and just taking over places. There was the kangaroo in Victoria Square. You know, all that sort of thing where they're just quite casually, well, the humans aren't here, so it's ours again. That's now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Lovely, but yeah.
That's a lovely thought. That's a good connected thought as well.
I like that a lot. And that's interesting too, because that makes me think about, and maybe this is a sort of a prompt, I don't know, but like, you know, you always see those sort of post-apocalyptic settings where like nature has taken over the cities again. But I always kind of have in my mind that that's like a many hundreds of years kind of process. So I like the idea that actually it could start happening quite quickly.
Really fast.
It's worth a Google. There's some great stuff out there. And even if you just notice in your own neighbourhoods, you know, you think of the local wildlife, because you see a lot more of them out there because there is less human activity, there's less traffic. Because of that, it's quieter, so you're sort of seeing more birds around, or that's sort of happening. But yeah, it's been really interesting seeing, because there was one in Wales, there was one in England, there was one in Adelaide.
There's a bunch of deer in Japan, I'm seeing. Wow.
Sometimes wreaking absolute havoc, like comical fun havoc. But there was a town that was essentially taken over by sheep in Wales. And it wasn't, you know, it was a little village. It wasn't, you know, just a really rural place. It was just sheep.
Oh my
everywhere.
God. Oh, so good.
What, Edie Pickles lawns and gardens and stuff, or what?
It was a hilarious Twitter thread, and it was just like, and now they've gone to the post office, and they were just congregating in random places, or they're standing in the intersection, and you're just going, or they're like half on this and half off that. And
Yeah.
I love
Very
That's-
cute.
Possibly.
You've already got
Oh,
that.
there's a cat.
Yeah, your New Forest is the same, Sarah, with all the horses and stuff, where they just...
Oh yeah, it's something very delightful about it as well. And you're going down the main street, and there's a horse going down the main street too. And
it.
Oh my goodness, I've found a really great video of this. I will.
Brockenhurst is where we've witnessed it, but I believe in Lyndhurst it's similar. Lloyd, have you got any requests for me? Math. There was math in this one, but they didn't really do the math. I mean, I'm not going to have characters doing the math because you know I can't do the math myself. So that I'll get it horribly wrong.
I would like someone trying to like convince somebody that maths is different to what they expect. Like, you know, trying to convince them that maths is really like full of mysterious secrets about the universe, or really artistic or something, you know, like someone doing maths or talking about maths in a really unexpected way.
Lloyd's been watching this program actually about that, sort of like in patterns and things, and why it's like mathematically honeycomb has to be the shape that it is. And why that's the same as the Giant's Causeway.
Yeah.
And they showed you this thing with like bubbles, and when the bubbles all go together, they become hexagonal.
Music and maths are always linked.
Yeah.
It could kind of be like, you know, science is art and art is science.
Yeah, how are they saying? My old work used to do something called STEAM, which was like STEM but with the arts in it, and it's like how like arts and language are connected to the STEM disciplines and important to their dissemination and people's understanding of them and all of that.
That's great.
So okay. So maths.
Vector calculus.
Vector calculus. No. I'm not doing vector calculus. What is that? You'll have to teach me. My research will go for 4 months. This story might happen like next year. So like whilst I learn vector calculus, excuse me. While we pause to learn all the math I didn't do between year 12 and now.
You could have someone mention vector calculus and then everyone else leaves the room.
What vector was that?
Yes, the calculation is that if you mention vector calculus, they will leave the room.
Yes.
Probability, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Probability of everyone in the room when you say vector calculus. Depends if you're at a conference of scientists or mathematicians or not.
Yeah, you could actually do one of those silly equations like I do sometimes.
Yeah.
But actually, it is just another instance of speaking the same language or not, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a language that not everybody speaks. Yeah.
We only speak very primal maths.
I speak, right. I speak
like
caveman level maths, and Lloyd speaks like fluent mathematician.
Yeah. No, we're at the level of what's his name out of Blackadder.
Baldric.
Yeah.
How many sunbeams?
Yes, there are sunbeams. When there's more than 2, it goes to sun.
Yeah.
So it's 1, 2, sun.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the answers. How many beans have I got? You've got some.
And there's many. And
That's
many
right.
is anything that's like over 10.
Yeah, I like that.
It's good.
Yeah,
I mean, that is what you end up with in like contexts where people didn't really need to count things. Things were more like that. There's only one of it, or there's a few of it, or there's a lot of it. Was all you really needed.
Yeah. But I was thinking on that sort of line with maths and people sort of interpreting it and speaking different languages, there's also that intergenerational math going on. So, within the period of 3 years, how you add up changes. And just thinking about all the moment who are trying to
homeschool and they're going, this isn't how we did it when I was at school. Yeah.
Back on the animals thing, this is not necessarily a request, but it's just an observation. We went for a walk behind the railway station at Seaford Meadows, and there would have been at least 100 kangaroos in the field. Now, this is, they get there. They do get there, and you see them a dozen or, sometimes a couple of dozen. There would have been at least 100. And they've got this really, as Claire was saying, they're sort of like, okay, no humans, not to worry. And they've got this really like elbow on the windowsill type attitude, like they had this really stretched out. It was a nice sunny day, but it's
really comfy.
They weren't.
The kangaroos are chilling.
Yeah, they were chilling. They were definitely chilling.
They're doing the Bondi Beach bastard.
Yes, they were.
And they weren't going away. They just look at you.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So what?
It's as though they've lost their fear a little bit.
Yeah.
And I've observed too, we get them along the track to Willunga. And if you walk past the little group now and they're just on the side of the track, as long as you don't stare at them, if you just sort of look away, and they will let you move past without bounding off, which is just wonderful.
Wow.
I saw something the other day and it got me thinking, and it was this person where they'd had like a token economy system with the squirrel, and they lived in this place and they would open up the window and the squirrel would exchange rocks for acorns that whoever was in the unit was doing. I'm like, that's lovely, but imagine moving into a unit and inheriting the squirrel.
You open the window and the squirrel comes in. What's going on? And it gives you a rock and what's this?
Oh, that's so good.
That's
adorable.
That's actually a really nice extension too of the animal thing.
Yeah.
That, moving into a place and you inherit the wild animals that someone else has kind of got a little bit used to. That happened to Sarah.
We had that with the magpie thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Something or other.
Nutmeg.
Oh. She looks very unimpressed with us.
You go and get lucky.
Oh, that's what I'm getting.
It's funny though, when we come on Storytime calls, sometimes it's a bit like our cats are on a video call, isn't it?
Yes. They're all seeing each other. That's very good. All right. Well, I'm going to head off and learn about goats.
All right.
Thank you very much.
That's
really nice.
Learning. Thank you for
coming. I will.
Great story. I love that story.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining me.
Bye.
Awesome.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.